the message that I want to give in particular to parents who have children in what I truly believe is the worst school district in America, the Olympia, Washington Public School District. I want you to know that if you feel like your only choice is to keep your kids in that school district, you need to know that no one in that district is looking out for them. And frankly, no one in that city is looking out for them. And no one in the criminal justice system is looking out for them. You are the only person who can be counted on to look out for the well-being of your child. And at this point, I will say that children need to be protected from the Olympia School District. If we could take that entire school district and start from scratch, it would be my wish that we could do that. We have talked on this show about no shortage of horror stories that have come out of the Olympia School District. From clear political and social indoctrination, sexual indoctrination, indoctrination around gender identity. We did an entire documentary about it called Operation Indoctrination, focused on the stories of current and former Olympia School District students who, in their own words, talked about what is being pushed upon them in that school district. And every time we point out these clear instances, like the elementary school teacher who essentially encouraged the transition of a young child whose family was so horrified by the fact that it was kept from them that they left the country and moved back to India. Imagine how horrified you have to be coming to the United States with your family for a better life, and then you realize that your child is being manipulated to be a gender other than the one that they were born. And so you take that child and move them back to India. That's the kind of stuff that happens in the Olympia School District. And then, of course, there's the stuff that's criminal. Now, I believe that some of those things we've covered on the show should be criminal. I believe it should be criminal to keep secrets from parents about what's happening with their kids. Unfortunately, that's not the reality that we're living in. But there are some things that, at least for the time being, society still agrees are criminal acts, like sexually abusing students, like teachers and staff members who prey on kids, who groom them, who rape them, who molest them. At least for now. And you know what? I'm not even going to rule out the possibility that at some point they'll find excuses for that too. And the Democrats in Olympia will say, let's lower the punishment for teachers who molest kids. Because that just seems like the direction we're going. But for now, it's still against the law. But that doesn't mean in Olympia and Thurston County that there's going to be a price to pay for doing that. Because apparently it is just fine as a teacher in the Olympia School District to groom a child throughout middle school and then to sexually abuse them in high school. Apparently that is just fine. The school will cover up for you when it comes out. Even the court system won't hold you accountable for it. People who are supposed to look out for victims and for the vulnerable, like prosecutors, they'll reach sweet plea deals with teachers who molest kids. Case in point, you'll see this headline out today from the Olympian. Former Olympia teacher accused of molesting student avoids prison time by accepting a plea deal. It says Jonathan J. Moore, 35 years old, pleaded guilty to third-degree assault in Thurston County Superior Court. Prosecutors had previously charged him with third-degree child molestation, second-degree sexual misconduct with a minor, and communication with a minor for immoral purposes. Those charges stemmed from accusations from a former student who's now 19. The student told police Moore groomed him while he attended Jefferson Middle School and molested him while he attended Capitol High School. There is, of course, a lot more to this story, and we're going to rely on the reporting of someone who actually cares about digging into the details of the horror that's happening in the Olympia School District. That is, of course, our friend Alicia Perkins with OSD Rescue. She runs a Substack. She and her husband both went through the Olympia School District. They've sent 4 kids through the Olympia School District, and she has made it her singular mission to expose what's happening inside that school district. I want you to wrap your mind around this story as we go through the details. Again, from Alicia Perkins and OSD Rescue. You've got this now former teacher, Jonathan Moore. He's 35 years old now. Not only was he just allowed by prosecutors and a court to last Friday take a plea deal that will allow him to avoid spending a single day in prison after allegedly, apparently we have to use allegedly still, because Mr. Moore was allowed to enter an Alford plea to, again, a case that started as charges of third-degree child molestation, second-degree sexual misconduct with a minor, and communication with a minor for immoral purposes, charges that individually should have landed him in prison. But prosecutors in Thurston County and a judge accepting the plea allowed him to take an Alford plea, which means you do not accept guilt. You do not acknowledge or confess to doing the crime, but you're admitting that they would have enough evidence to convict me at trial if this goes to trial. They gave him such a sweet plea to third-degree assault that he gets credit for one day that he spent in jail when he was originally arrested back in February of 2023. That is the only time someone who groomed and molested a student as a teacher, the only time they have to spend behind bars, the one day in jail when they were arrested for this. And as you're going to learn, the OSD headline is this. OSD rescue. Olympia School District settles with sexual abuse victim for $3.2 million. Teacher avoids prison with plea deal for child sex crimes spanning years. Yes, you read that correctly. You heard that correctly. The only people who are paying a penalty for the crimes of this teacher are you, the taxpayers, footing the bill for a $3.2 million settlement from the school district to this victim. And I'm not saying the victim's not deserving of that. I think the victim is very deserving of that. But the person who actually perpetrated the crime is out scot-free. Didn't even have to admit guilt. Didn't even have to admit guilt. Will not have to spend a day in prison. After over a period of years grooming and sexually abusing a little boy. And yes, a middle schooler is a little boy. And it's just the taxpayers who have to pay the price for that sexual predator. So I want to go into, because it gets even worse than this, because at every turn, the Olympia School District tried to cover for this teacher, even when it came to the criminal investigation, and ultimately when it came to the firing of that teacher, glossing over when they sent, and we'll get to it, when they sent a letter to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction saying, this is why this teacher cannot teach anymore. No mention of sexual misconduct whatsoever. So again, I'm going to read from OSD Rescue and Alicia Perkins reporting on this because it's far more profound and accurate and in-depth. So the victim in this case, they refer to the victim, again, it's a boy, with the initials SV. SV describes grades 6 through 8 at Jefferson as a grooming phase in which Mr. Moore assumed a parental role rather than a teacher-student relationship with appropriate boundaries. Sounds familiar. Honestly, we've covered a lot of stories out of the Olympia School District with teachers acting like parents. According to SV, Mr. Moore developed an elaborate fantasy life in which he envisioned them having children together via a surrogate, insisting SV call him boyfriend, and making plans to live together once SV was an adult. Again, this is with a preteen in middle school. Mr. Moore's communication was overtly sexual in nature, with the first sexual advancements towards SV taking place at Jefferson Middle School in a classroom. In 2021, SV's junior year in high school, Mr. Moore transferred to Capitol High School as a visual communication and design teacher and a debate honor society advisor. So yeah, once their target that they were preying on made it into high school, guess where the teacher went? To the same high school. Coincidence? I think not. It says once Mr. Moore moved to Capitol High School, SV describes him initiating frequent sexual encounters in the interior newsroom where he ran the student-led TV station. SV would periodically try to distance themselves from Mr. Moore, only to have Mr. Moore make threats to harm himself, even slitting his wrists once in a twisted attempt to emotionally manipulate SV. So you have a child in middle school in the Olympia School District where, remember, at the forefront of keeping secrets from parents, at the forefront of believing that teachers and schools should take the place of parents, the entire context of the debate we're having around parental rights and the efforts right now in Olympia from Democrats to upend the Parental Bill of Rights. The entire reason we needed that to begin with. Because you have teachers taking on parenting roles for students. Same story over and over we hear out of Olympia, but in this case, the parenting role that this teacher took on was clearly in an attempt to groom this student and turn it into a sexual relationship, which is rape because, of course, children can't consent to sex of any kind, and they certainly can't consent to it with their teacher. So think of how sick this is. Building a fantasy life. We're going to be together one day. We'll have children via a surrogate. This child even understands and tries to distance themselves from this teacher who's luring them, according to the kid basically, into this back studio to molest them. And this teacher slits their wrists and says they're going to kill themselves if this child doesn't continue to give in to his sexual fantasies. 0 days in prison. 0 days in prison. Insane. And it gets worse. The Olympia School District, again, tries to play cover for this teacher on several occasions. This is an excerpt from one of the police reports talking about how this investigation played out. I'm going to I won't read it all, but I'm going to walk you through what happened here because it's very clear to me that the school was trying to hide evidence. It's very clear to me the school was trying to hide evidence, and I think it will be clear to you too. So this law enforcement officer, this investigator, gets contacted by the director of human resources at the Olympia School District in September of 2022, okay? These dates are going to be very, very important when it comes to the Olympia School District hiding things. So he's contacted. They say that Jonathan Moore has been terminated as an employee of Capitol High School because of professional misconduct with students. Interesting way to put it. These allegations of professional misconduct were investigated by a private investigator and were handled internally, which resulted in Jonathan Moore being on administrative leave for a significant amount of time. So I might start there. Initially, this is handled internally. Police are contacted in September of 2022. At that point, this had been handled internally with a private investigator. Remember how part of the parental rights debate is contacting parents immediately and letting police know, and they're like, oh, we let police know, and they want to hide anything they can. So the investigator now comes in, the actual investigator, the police officer, interviews the victim, talks to the school. And the school, as you know, because they had a private investigator come in, had already had all of these internal investigative records, right? Well, the investigator, the police officer, asked for them. And what was he told? I was informed that the school would not be providing these internal investigative records based on advice from legal counsel. So they had to obtain them via a search warrant, a public school district. The police come in to investigate accusations of sexual misconduct, and the school district stonewalls. They already have all these investigative records for what their person found. But on the advice of legal counsel, which you're paying for, by the way, on the advice of legal counsel, even though there's an accusation that a teacher raped, sexually abused a child, they're saying, come back with the search warrant. So investigators have to do that. Let's keep going. I was informed that after Jonathan Moore's termination, staff at the Olympia School District cleaned out the classroom that he'd been using. Several security-style cameras were discovered in the classroom and the back green room area where the sexual acts with the child occurred. The school advised me that they believed the cameras were inoperable. So they were removed, they were secured within the school district before law enforcement was made aware of them, which did not allow for photographs to be taken and the cameras to be collected in their original condition. Additionally, several USB drives were located along with the cameras that had been secured in the high school principal's office. So again, take this in. Months too late, police are finally coming in to do a proper investigation. And the school had already removed what it says were inoperable security cameras that had been placed in the area where this teacher was allegedly sexually abusing a child. And the USBs, those drives from those cameras, were locked up in the principal's office. Gee. So police couldn't even take pictures of the positions where those cameras had been. That sounds like interfering in a police investigation to me. And then later on, there was a witness that their name is blacked out, so I'm not exactly sure who they are. But they go on to tell the investigator that they believed the cameras were operable because one time the teacher, Moore, told them that the cameras were operable. So there's every reason to believe that these cameras were operable and were documenting this sexual abuse. And then when police want to know where are they, the teachers, the school had already taken them down, locked them up, put the USB drives in the principal's office. Tell me that that doesn't rise to the level of criminal interference in this law enforcement investigation. Not to mention how late they're contacting police in this matter, after their own private investigator does their due diligence first, right? And then all of that work, they won't hand over to the police without a warrant, a public school district. So here's the real kicker for me. And again, you wouldn't know this, these pieces wouldn't be tied together if there weren't someone like Alicia Perkins, a parent who's had enough, actually doing the due diligence and the reporting that the real media, quote unquote, won't do. So there was a letter sent to the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction from the Olympia School District. It is dated May 8th, 2023. May 8th, 2023. Keep that date in mind. It's addressed directly to Chris Rakedahl from the superintendent of the Olympia School District. It's talking about the certification of this predator, Jonathan Moore. Dear Superintendent Rakedahl, pursuant to state law, I report that Jonathan Moore, a teacher with the Olympia School District, engaged in acts that constitute unprofessional conduct. This includes inappropriate interactions with students occurring from approximately April to June 2022, including engaging in uncivil and bullying behavior, violating professional boundaries, failing to provide a safe, respectful, and inclusive school environment, and other violations of district policies. Nowhere in here does it just clearly say sexual abuse of a student. Maybe you say, well, maybe they didn't know, the investigation was still going on. No, it wasn't. You know how we know that? Because Jonathan Moore was arrested in February of 2023. They had enough evidence to arrest him for sex crimes, the crimes he would later be charged with. In February of 2023. February, March, April, May. That letter is sent to the Superintendent of Public Instruction saying that this teacher engaged in unprofessional conduct, uncivil and bullying behavior. No, that teacher molested a child. That teacher molested a child. But at every juncture, the Olympia School District sought to water it down. Because that's what they do. Every single person who knew about this case, who tried to hide evidence in this case from the police, who failed to notify the police in a timely manner, should lose their jobs. Instead, everyone's off the hook except you, the taxpayer. The teacher's off the hook. The school's off the hook. OSPI is off the hook. The victim's left to suffer, and the taxpayers foot the bill. And shame also on the prosecutors. You have all the evidence in the world And you're going to allow this guy to take a plea deal, an Elford plea no less, where he doesn't even have to admit to guilt and he doesn't have to spend a day in prison. It's disgusting. And again, I'm not going to tell any parent what to do with their kids. But you need to know if you have a child in the Olympia School District, no one is looking out for their well-being. No one is concerned with the well-being of your child except you. And this is just another story in a long, long list of stories about the Olympia School District that show exactly why we need the Parental Bill of Rights to stay intact, and exactly why we cannot continue to hand more power and influence over our kids over to government employees who do stuff like this. Disgusting.